What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast episode. What are we on now? 383, 383. Lots of threes now, getting bigger. So we got a podcast here. We're going to go off on a tangent about a idea. It started off with a podcast we did last week. We were talking to John Hansen, who came on the podcast. He, competed at the ADCC World Championships, tough grappler, and he shared that idea of like the 80-20 principle. And so if you're familiar with it, it's a principle that exists, and a lot of times let's look at it in economics, but it kind of exists in a lot of different places, and it's not always exactly 80-20, but it's just like a working mental model for different things. And we'll talk about some ideas to chew on that you can consider. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web, they're one of the OGs in the CBD space, and they make a ton of other products, including CBD, CBN products, which are great for helping you get to sleep. They also have some functional mushroom products like reishi and lion's mane and things like that to have certain effects. They also have muscle rubs and balms that are great. If your muscles are just a little banged up after training, they can go on. Super helpful. If you guys want to check out their stuff, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. And again, if you look at something on their website you find, you're like, I want that. I want to try it out, see how I feel, see how it affects me. You can use a promo code Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order at checkout. And that's at charlottesweb.com. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. They're one of our longtime sponsors. They've been with us for a while. And again, they make a lot of good jiu-jitsu gear, everything from rash guards and shorts, for no-gi training, gis for the gi training, T-shirts, merch, anything that you might want jiu-jitsu related. They have great designs, good customer service, and good quality stuff. You can check them out at epicrollbjj.com for more info. And if you find something you like, save 20% off the order with promo code Chewjitsu20. If you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by rolling on over to our website or our Patreon website, patreon.com/the Chewjitsu podcast. When you go over there, it'll give you all the perks, all the info. You can join for free if you want to. There's a free option there. But if you want to join up and support the podcast directly, you can do so for a very inexpensive price and get access to a bunch of extras, including seminar recordings, stretching routines for specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners, and extra bits from many of our guests that we've had on the podcast over the years. All there for you for an inexpensive price, and you support the podcast. Patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Also, if you guys want to join my daily email that I send out, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. JOIN. If you go there, I'll give you a free ebook and a video that goes into some different strategies on being more focused with your training. Super important. We're going to talk about that sort of stuff on this podcast in just a minute, because again, you're going to get more focused on the things that are more important to you. But you can check it out at chewjitsu.net/join. When you join up, you'll get the ebook, the video, and then afterwards I will give you a email every day, Monday through Friday usually, sometimes on the weekends, that goes through everything from training tips, diets, books I'm reading, checklists for different things I think might be useful to your training or mindset, and anything I think might be useful to you in jiu-jitsu. And if you want to check it out, go to chewjitsu.net/join. Eugene, you said that you were that the idea was sparked from you with the conversation with John.
Yeah. So John kind of just talked about when he got into jiu-jitsu, there really wasn't a lot of information out there. Everything was very, YouTube was kind of there and you couldn't really find techniques. It was more like he would look at ADCC matches and he'd find certain things. Initially, he settled on watching, Marcelo Garcia and X-Guard and Butterfly and things like that. So he really focused on a very small aspect of his game. As jiu-jitsu has gotten popular and there's more stuff out there, more information, more techniques, he actually thought that may have hindered his progress. So he really only focused on a few variable things, and a few specific aspects like hand fighting was a huge thing he talked about. So I was just kind of thinking about the conversation, and I kind of just start to think, and then, the 80-20 rule popped up. And I've kind of know loosely about the 80-20 rule, but I started digging a little deeper, and just a little background. It's called 80-20 rule, or the Pareto Principle. Pareto Principle.
Yep.
And basically, it's based in economy. Like he was an economist in the 1800s, and he kind of looking back in Italy, he saw that Italy's land. So 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. So then he started kind of I started kind of diving deeper, and whether it's in business, maybe 80% of your revenue is from 20% of your clients, those type of things. So, and Chewy, you had, when we started talking about it a little bit before the podcast started, you had some ideas in your life with the business that, businesses you run, essentially, the gym and kind of the Jiu-Jitsu courses and product. And you kind of saw that there was some carryover to that. So with that said, we wanted kind of to discuss maybe, all right, how does the 80-20 rule apply to jiu-jitsu and progression of jiu-jitsu, success in competitions, training, all that kind of stuff. So your thoughts, so a basic idea for jiu-jitsu, I'll start it off, is that 20% of your techniques will lead to 80% of your success on the mats. So yeah, and we talked about your competitions, kind of the way you finish matches or how your matches turn out. You have certain techniques that you go for that tend to be kind of the winning techniques that you tend to hit all the time. So, Chewy, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, think about this. This is not just a Chewy thing, right? You watch any good competitor, someone that's been competing for a long time, and you'll notice this thing where they kind of do the same things over and over again. Now, obviously, no technique is always the same, right? Every time you execute a technique, it's always a little different. You know what I mean? Because you think like the situations are different. It's like when you squat, right? Your feet are roughly the same necessarily when you're squatting, but you're always a little different with your feet to some degree. But when you're, competing or rolling, every time you execute a technique, it's never quite the same because, like, let's say the person's a different person. Well, then that technique's going to be slightly different because it's on a different body type. Or if the person moves a little bit differently, you're going to respond to it differently. But nonetheless, you're essentially doing the same technique overall to the people. And so with that, you'll see the people use the same techniques over and over again to the point where a lot of times people become synonymous. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, where their name becomes synonymous with a position or a technique. They become known for that. Now, that is a clear sort of example of them saying, hey, here, stripping out all the most important stuff out of my game. This is the best stuff I got. I know a lot of other stuff, but this is my best stuff. And this is what I'm going to use. Famously, I heard Roger Gracie, one of the all-time greats at jiu-jitsu. He said that, I know a lot of stuff, but the stuff that I can like use that I've mastered, like he says, I can count on a hand, and like my hands, how many things I've done, I really know. And so again, that's an example of like, you kind of go back to the same stuff over and over because it's your best stuff. And again, this is why a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, you're sifting through all this information and there's so much coming at you, but you sift through it and you tend to find the best stuff that works for you. Right. And again, there's not a lot of times a quick, short and snappy way to do this. This is trial and error. This is you playing around with stuff because, there's times where people will have a body type that looks like they're good for triangles and the triangle fits them perfectly. There's other times where I've had guys who look like they should be triangle guys, but they become good with kimuras. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what they feel best with. Like, I don't understand, but that's what feels best for them. And that's what they tend to do better with. And so again, there's no snappy short way. This is about experimentation and intuition, feeling things out for yourself. And so you eventually find what your 20% is and you hammer that down. This is something actually I was talking about in one of my emails recently where I've heard people talk about, there's this idea in jiu-jitsu now, and I've been doing I've been grappling for 25 years, jiu-jitsu for around 22-ish, right? And you see these cycles of techniques that come and go, and they're very much like fashion trends. You go watch a movie from the 90s and you can literally see clothing that was in style then went out of style. Now it's back in style and it literally looks like stuff that people would wear today. And so you have this sort of in jiu-jitsu, especially this chasing of the new stuff, shiny object syndrome. Oh man, this new position's out. I got to learn this. And oh, this is out. I got to learn this. And there's nothing wrong with learning it, but it doesn't mean you're gonna put all your eggs in that basket. A lot of times I've seen people sort of like say, well, the fundamentals, they're like dying because of this position's the new meta, whatever. and then you watch people use the same stuff over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And if you watch a lot of matches, a lot of times you'll start to see really similar movements used over and over and over again. And like, for as an example, one of the reasons, like when we're doing back taking classes or whatever, while we might use as a warm-up drill, we might use the chair sit, is if you watch enough matches, you will see that damn chair sit executed in some fashion over and over again, just transitioning either from side control or mount to back mount. It's used all the time. So that's that's a 20% move versus like, okay, we got this one sort of fringy technique that I saw so-and-so do in a match somewhere. They may be able to use it, but it's probably not going to be most people's 20%. It's not going to be the 20% of jiu-jitsu. You see it every now and then, but it's not one of the cores. And so anyway, going back to it, you definitely see this in people's games. It's my game is like this, and really everyone's game becomes like this at a certain point where your best stuff represents a fraction of what you truly know, but it's the stuff that you feel best with. And also too, in a lot of cases, it's the best stuff in jiu-jitsu where you start to see people do the same stuff over and over again. They just get really good at executing it because that, it's fundamentally, that's the best stuff that you're gonna be able to use. It's why everybody uses a chair sit. It's not because someone has like a secret sort of one-upmanship on the chair sit. It's just the chair sit's a really good move, so everybody uses it. It's a single leg, it's a double leg. Those are just really good ways to get to the leg. You may finish them in different ways, but nonetheless, it's like that's what you're after. And so yeah, you see that principle at work in jiu-jitsu all the time, where there's a lot of stuff that's out there. Very little of it gets used at a very high level. Most of it, gets stripped down to very core basic stuff, with a little bit of spice of complexity and sort of one-off sort of techniques thrown in here and there.
Could that 80-20 rule kind of be a trap for a beginner? And what I mean by that is, like, you find, oh, I'm hitting triangles on everyone, so that's all I want to do. And then you never really explore. I think that as you start to develop your game, you're going to realize, all right, here's my techniques. But, for you, for example, you didn't, I think you had mentioned, you didn't want to play off your back, or you had trouble with getting in a triangle and getting stuck there, things like that. So something you avoided, right? Is that, thinking about it, like, could that be a trap? Meaning, like, you only do things that you're good at because you have success with it. And you're like, well, I'm going to not worry about anything else. It's kind of like maybe even avoiding leg locks, right? Like, well, I don't want to do leg locks. I'm good at this stuff. I don't want to learn a new part. So maybe as a beginner, how do we not get in that trap of like, well, I'm just going to fixate on these little positions that I have success with?
Well, it's not just beginners, because think about all the really good black belts who were very anti leg locks when the leg lock renaissance happened in like the mid 2000 teens, and they got left behind. So it's this shelling up of not doing things and experimenting that affects everybody from beginners to very experienced black belts.
Yeah.
And this is not a call to not experiment, right? You should always be experimenting. That's why a lot of times when you look at some of the best rules or principles or little pithy sayings, right? A lot of times they're a bit of a paradox where they're true, yes, but, or there's always something that kind of goes against it. And so, yeah, the 80-20 rule, yeah, you focus on the 20% for sure, but that doesn't mean that you stop experimenting and exploring. Because, for instance, let's go into the business sense. The business that we have, like the way the business and things like run like that, the 20% of the things that move the needle for me right now are different than the 20% than they were 10 years ago, right? Different people, different times, different situations. And so a lot of times as we change and we get better, we expand, our 20% changes. Just like, in jiu-jitsu, the 20% of my game, is way different than it was when I was a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt. It's very different now. There's some similarities there, right? But as my game expanded, things change, right? You think about this from a person to person, like sometimes what it took to get you there isn't what it takes to stay there in situations, right? So for instance, some of the things that are required to maybe build a business sometimes change to actually keep the business going. There's different sort of, there's a difference between growth and sort of maintaining and that sort of thing. And so I think that, really this is just, you undulate between these two, right? Of this exploration and sort of simmering down or sifting down to the core.
Mhm.
And also too, it depends on your goals at that any given point. So if I've talked about this a bunch where, if you're getting ready for a competition, you should be focused on your 20%, your best stuff. That's where you focus in on, right? If you're not in competition mode, then we're like exploring, we're testing things out, we're playing around with positions, and you can always build off positions. You could take your triangle and say, man, I'm finishing everybody. Well, let me loosen the lock up a little bit, let people escape out of it just so I can see where else the thing could go. There's all kinds of ways to skin that cat, but I don't think it's a trap necessarily unless you make it one. I think that it's a call that always understand like what's the most important stuff that you're doing. So for instance, in the business side, these are some of the things that I have to relate to. There's a lot of extra stuff that I will do periodically, but let's say the times or like time is tight. I don't have a lot of time. Maybe I'm traveling or whatever. I know what the handful of things that I need to get done are, and that move the needle forward, and everything else is extra. And so if it comes down to like sort of plain triage, it's like, well, I do these things and that's all I'm doing because that's the bare minimum. That's all I need to get done. This is actually moving the needle. The rest of this stuff is great if I can get it and I like doing it, but it's not
Yeah.
essential. This 20% here, this little thing here is essential. And so, and also too, like we were talking about it before the podcast. If I look at our stats in our gym and I look at check-ins, we've got a lot of members, but I could look at it and see, well, this is the 20% of the members that use the membership the most. And it's generally kind of a clear drop off, right? Like who uses it the most. And then even within that 20%, typically there's a smaller like fraction. So you'll see like there's like a 15 and a 3 and a 1%. It breaks down even more because you'll see like, okay, from that 20, well, we've got like 3% that are just here every damn day, and then we've got about 15 that are here like 3 days or 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever. But so you got these things, and you see that too with like a lot of times when you get into even like tax brackets, right? It's like you'll see it breaks down where it's like, okay, like this amount of people make this much in the country, this and this and this, and it spreads out. But that's not to say that sometimes maybe like in your gym, you might have someone that's part of the 80% that's doing whatever. And then all of a sudden they flip and they become a 20% person. They all of a sudden they flip and they're starting to train more. That happens all the time. I've seen people literally go from just kind of dabbling around to all of a sudden they get really serious and then they're training 5 days a week. And so, those things can shift around a little bit.
Yeah, it's maybe kind of not so much a rule as an idea. Like it's just kind of a framework, but it's loose, right? It's loose. So, yeah, I mean, like it's like, oh, this is a hard, fast. I mean, every situation, environment, and that may fluctuate, as time goes on. One thing you mentioned, hey, when I started jiu-jitsu, this is the way my game was, and now it's different. And you have to, if you don't adapt, if you never experiment, if you never take a few little risks here and there, you're not going to evolve, right? So like maybe you played and you kind of developed your old man game, right? You played this game where it was a high pace, man, moving a lot. And then as you got older, you start to develop your kind of pressure pad, a little more. I mean, you obviously had pressure in your game, but it was like more slowing down the roll and then using that to your advantage to kind of cook your opponent. So as far as like that idea of letting go of things, how does maybe someone start to let go of things or discover things that don't work for them anymore?
That's actually interesting because it's like there's sometimes like I notice this thing sometimes whereas let's go back to like business for a second. Sometimes with business or running the gym, there's certain activities that I used to do that like I enjoy doing them, but I had to let go of them to some degree because they weren't serving the purpose. They weren't moving the needle forward anymore. There was a point of either diminishing returns or a point where I needed to give someone else to do it, and shouldn't be me. And that sometimes is tough. And same thing happens with our jiu-jitsu sometimes where, especially if you've been training for a long time, if you're new to this stuff, then you're kind of a clean slate. But if you're someone that's been training for a long time, you eventually come to a point where you maybe start to get good And we find that pleasant. We like that. I feel good. I'm getting better at this stuff. I'm submitting people. You come to like that story that you can play in your head about how good you are or whatever. And you will come to points where you're going to have to let go of things. You have to change your games up a little bit. Maybe you're injured. Maybe you had a severe, like, let's say if you had some sort of severe knee injury, well, you're not able to triangle as much anymore because of the pressure it puts on your knee. Or maybe, your neck's a little jacked up. We talked to Luke Becker, the wrestler, and remember him talking about wrestling. And he loves to wrestle, but he doesn't really shoot a lot anymore because of his neck injuries. So he does a lot of upper body stuff and does a lot of counter wrestling, right? But
Yep.
that's not how he played in his heyday when he was at his best, but it's how he has to play now. And so for me too, it's the same thing where when I was younger, I used to be able to play just all over the place kind of game. I just felt like I had a gas tank that just didn't end. In my mid 30s, all of a sudden I'm starting to feel it. I actually remember one of the first times I felt it was when I was 35. I was competing at the Nogi Pans, and I was competing at what was my normal pace. And I remember coming off the mat, just breathing heavy and feeling like, man, what the hell happened? Why am I so tired from that? And I started to notice this in the gym when I was rolling with some of the younger guys. It was just harder for me to keep up. And so I had to shift my game. Now, I didn't necessarily enjoy that. I don't like having to slow my game down. I don't enjoy having to play that sort of slower old man game, but I like being competitive. Feel like I'm making progress and I'm still improving. So therefore I change it. And so I think some of it is just, you have to, it's like healthy self-assessment. This is, I think, if you're going to be good at pretty much anything in life, you have to kind of ask yourself lots of questions and be introspective. How is this working for me? What could I do better? I worked with a guy who does some client work with me. He's a gym owner, and I do some coaching with him, right? And we were like kind of going through all the stuff that he was doing, and you're kind of digging into stuff, and you're like, bro, how's this working for you? You're doing this, this, and this. And like, how is this working for you? One of the big things we had to do for him, which is a tip for a lot of people, is get off the damn phone. I'm like, I get it, dude. You want to see what's going on, but how's this working for you? You're wasting crap tons of time on this phone and not getting your work done. And then you're stressed about not having any time for your family. Well, let's get the work done. Let's get rid of this phone. How's this working for you? This phone time that you're spending, this hour and a half a day, is not part of the 20%, right? You can make time for it later on if you want to, but it's not important. And so sometimes you just got to be sort of have a healthy objective look at things and like, okay, what's actually moving the needle for me right now? And then going forward. So like with your going back to jiu-jitsu, because I know I'm talking a lot about business stuff. When you go to jiu-jitsu, it's just like, okay, looking at like the bright spots of your game. What's happening in my game, what's working, what's not working, right? And having that ability to just sort of take an adjustment and take a look at it. Most people naturally move towards the things that they're good at, so they tend to, it's very easy, if you're trying to figure out what you're good at, most people naturally kind of have an idea because they move towards it. It's the same reason why you go to the gym and people tend to focus on the lifting, the upper or lower body or whatever the lift is. They tend to focus on what they want, what they like, because it's what they're good at, what feels best to them. This is why you'll get the guys with, big jacked upper bodies and no legs, because bench pressing is just fun for them and they don't like squatting. But you just figure out where your bright spots are and you can start there and kind of grow from there. Or, if you start running into plateaus and like hitting a wall, then you start having to look at it like, what is going on here? What am I doing that's causing trouble? That was like the situation with me back in 2017 with the business, where I'm hitting a wall for the gym. And I'm like, what do I need to do to change this? Because I don't like this whole situation.
Well, what specifically, I mean, do you feel like he's just like not making, so in jiu-jitsu, is it like the success rate of your submissions, or not, not having success on the mats? Like, how are you introspective in that capacity? But also even in business, like what are some of the signs? Is it just purely in business? Is it purely financial? Is it have to do with your happiness, your fulfillment, those kind of things too? Because a lot of it, I feel like, is not just like cut and dry. Some of it's like like what feels good, like, do you enjoy, like, shit, do I enjoy doing this stuff still? Is this still fun for me? Like, is jiu-jitsu still fun? I don't know. Like, that's like, how were you introspective in that capacity to like realize, okay, things need to change?
Which one?
Let's start jiu-jitsu.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Was
you
it?
can start with this. Like one of the things that I get into in like my Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook that I give away as an example is people get into these ruts, these plateaus, if you want
Yeah.
to call them that, where they don't feel like they're getting any better, right? And a lot of times it's because they have no focus at all, right? Or they're doing the same thing too much, right? So again, there is something about, hammering your 20%, but the 20% doesn't stay static. It's a dynamic situation. So you always have to be expanding. You have to always be taking in new stuff and trying new stuff out. You know, there's something to be said about actually having good like focus training versus really hard aimless training. And so a lot of people will train really hard and think they got something out of it, but you didn't get anything out of it because you really weren't all that focused. Maybe you got something from it, but you don't really know. Whereas you can go and get your butt whooped, but if you're really focused on what you're chasing, a lot of times you're going to feel satisfied with it because you know that you're working towards something very specific. Um, and so a lot of times you could even shift some of your training sessions, 20% of your training sessions, right? Or 80% of your training sessions to be focused on the 20% of a particular part of your game and just being very focused on it rather than just going into the gym and just rolling around, right? So like if you go to an open mat or something, you could say, hey, like start in this position for me. I want to work from here. And then work from there, right? That's an example of it, right? Like that's how you can sometimes blast through plateaus because people are aimless. On the other side, sometimes people are just too stuck, right? And they're just doing this thing where they're just, like because one of the other issues about like the 80-20 principles is they talk about like 20% of the stuff creates 80% of the problems. So, for instance, anybody that's run a gym or run a business, a lot of times you have a very small fraction of people that actually create most of your issues and problems,
That's a
right?
great point. Yeah.
I mean, dude, it's like, it's like most people are amazing. Most people are very reasonable. Hey, look at our current political climate. I guarantee you that if you were able, if you were God, right? And you could go and have a conversation with every American person in our country and have like an in-depth conversation.
Mhm.
I guarantee you somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% would probably be pretty reasonable people that are just doing their thing. They're getting by. Sure, they might have some beliefs that disagree with one or the other, but they would have far more similarities than they would differences, far more shared humanity than differences. And 20% of those people in America would be batshit crazy. Right on whatever wings of the spectrum they are, they're nuts. And those are a lot of times the people that we see that are very loud on the internet that are talking about it, and that we sort of lump everybody together with this group or that group because of the crazy loud ones. And so like as a business, I get 20% of your problems here. So sometimes you can even look at it this way where like, okay, like I'm starting to have problems with this 20% of my game that I could work on. I think it's another place you can go to. You can start to look at that, right? And so there's lots of different ways to look at it. I think the big thing is when we're talking about your jiu-jitsu, and this is really anything, is you really have to be intuitive, and I think you have to be willing to, I know this sounds weird, but like have some conversation with yourself. I think this is one of the values of journaling, and even as a busy father, right? Like which most of us are busy, I still make time for journaling because of that idea of introspection, figuring out how things are going, even like on a nightly basis. Like one of the things I'll do right now is I'll sort of check in. Here was my goals today. How did I do? What could I do better? Just kind of reflecting, like, how did the day
Yeah.
go? Like, where did I screw up? Right? Like, did I screw up today? Did I waste time doing this? Did I do something I shouldn't have? Did I say no, or should I have said no to something that someone asked me to do and then it got in the way? Right? There's all kinds of things like that. And so I'll just sort of check in. I have a list of things I want to get done that day. And then I will simply reflect on it and like, all right, new sheet of paper, what are we going to do tomorrow? Just this kind of self-reflection. So a lot of times we can do that with our game very simply. You don't necessarily have to journal if you're driving home. Like a lot of people have, at least somewhat of a commute from their gyms.
Yep.
And that's a great time where you can sort of just tune in, like what just happened. The dust is settling, your mind's relaxed a little bit, you've got the endorphins from training. What the hell just happened? What could I do better the next day? What did I mess up? That kind of stuff. You can play around with it a little bit. And so for jiu-jitsu, I think it's about just, with anything, it's about having the intuition to simply tune in with yourself and figure out what's going on. And again, this is best done without excess stimulation. So again, a lot of people, they're watching YouTube videos or stuff when they're watching, Netflix on the TV, then they are listening to podcasts doing something. They get in their car, they're listening to a podcast, they're watching YouTube videos. They get out of the YouTube videos, they're sitting on the toilet, they're scrolling. Like, you think about how little people have of just quiet time where their brain's not being bombarded by information. And there's a value in just simply just tuning out of stuff and letting your mind sort of float around with whatever's going on. I know that sounds maybe like old man Chewy, whatever, but I really think there's a value to it, to digging into your stuff and figuring out what you want to do and which directions you should be moving to. I think most people can figure that stuff out pretty easily, but they're too busy taking in information or content or being entertained or stimulated and not giving themselves enough time to like sift through that stuff.
Well, the idea of like visualization, I mean, that's a great tool to use. I mean, whether it's working through techniques, game planning, I mean, visualizing what you're doing and what you want to accomplish. I mean, I think that a lot of that, when I am preparing for a tournament, like obviously the physical is, I spend a lot of time on the physical and not as much on the mental side, which I think like the mental preparation for me is really, really important. Like I was like, man, I want to have my cardio in check. I want to make sure I'm on weight and I'm strong and this and that. But like also just visualizing what it's going to feel like to be there and visualizing my opening, right? What do I want to do? How do I want to set that up? So I think, when you're kind of, like you said, you're kind of relaxed, or you have a few minutes after training where you're kind of just like settling down, letting your body kind of chill, even stretching a little bit, whatever it is, doing like a cool down routine. If you have, just having that kind of in place, I think can really help. Just kind of because it's so fresh too, right? It's like right there. It just happened as well. Like so when you're driving home or like I said, even on the mats, when you're kind of chilling out, I think it's a great time to kind of reflect on the events.
Yeah, they've done some studies on different people, like Anders Ericsson did some studies on people, and they found that a lot of times people that were, let's say, very high level, like very highly skilled in their spaces, a lot of times these intense bouts of focus and training were accompanied by some sort of rest. Now, a lot of us don't have the ability to just rest all day, right? Like you don't have the ability to go train and then go nap all day and so forth and so on. But, I think that there's just simply maybe you can have like sort of a type of rest from taking in more stuff, right? Like just let my brain sift through this for 20 minutes, before I start taking in more ideas, stuff like that. Just letting your brain kind of process things a little bit because for instance, like last night when we were done training, I had that foot trip, right?
I gotta tell everybody real quick, Chewy launched the shit out of me. It was so beautiful that he tripped me and like we were both in the air. And yeah, it was crazy. I don't know if I've ever been airborne like that in my life, as far as in a jiu-jitsu format, I guess. But it was like a very weird feeling. I was fine, but it was like we were both so surprised. It was like perfect. I felt like I was floating in air essentially, and then I met the ground. But it was very like the feel of, we both kind of looked at each other like, you're like, are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Are you okay? And we were like, that was fucking awesome.
Well,
But I hate to be on the receiving end of it, but it was pretty badass. And I wonder if you found the video of it, if you had,
I was just thinking about, I'm going to see if I can log into the cameras.
All right.
For me though, with that throw, I went home, and as I was driving, I was like kind of replaying, like, because obviously I hit the throw, but I like launched myself in the process.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like what did I do wrong there? And I'm playing through it. And I was even thinking about, because the grip that I did on you is not a grip that I normally play.
So it was accidental. Like you just kind of happened. We ended up there.
I'm doing the thing that we all do. We're just experimenting.
Yeah.
And so I was just experimenting, and I just felt it. I was like, huh. Because I can't hit the slide by in the gi, but I was like, well, this feels very similar to the grip. So let me try this out. And it just fucking worked. I was like, whoa, there we go. Right. Well. Like, and I mean, I went too hard on that kick and I ended up like tripping you, but I mean, I landed flat on my back too.
Did you?
And well, like, yeah. So like, I remember there was a moment where I'm in the air and I'm like, we're both tabletopped. So,
We
you're
gotta see it.
horizontal, I'm horizontal, I'm looking at you. I still have a hold of your collar, and I'm like, "Oh, snaps." And I just sort of let go because I wanted to make sure that you could move around if you needed to. And I just let go of the gi grip there, and then we both land flat on our back and we both came up. Which is amazing. Like you've been doing this, if you're doing this stuff for so long, like in the middle of that short split second fall, I'm able to make a coherent thought of,
Yeah.
oh, I see Eugene falling. I better let
Yeah.
go so he doesn't hurt himself, so he can move
Yeah.
around and
Yeah.
adjust to the throw. But I was playing in my head, what were the grips that I used that day? Okay, whatever. And I think I'm going to try this again when my next gi day, right? So again, that's in my mind. I'm thinking about that. And so, that's a very simple idea. Like, okay, what just happened? And I used to do this all the time. I remember me and a buddy of mine when I first started training. He trained with me, he lived with me, and so we would train. And when we left to come home, we would literally debrief each other.
Mm-hmm.
Hey man, what happened? I don't know. Man, I rolled that blue belt day. What did you do? Oh, he got me in the same thing. We would talk about this stuff, and by the end of the drive home, we would have a idea of what we wanted to work on the next day. And so that idea of debriefing yourself is useful. I do it on a daily basis with just my life in general, just try to like keep myself on task, but also too, just with your training, just looking at it. And if you need like a suggestion here, you can say, okay, well, what were the bright spots of today? Like what went right? What was I doing well? Okay, that can be a place to continue going down the rabbit hole. You can also look at it and say, were there any particular issues that I was having? Was I struggling in any positions? Was I just getting crushed in certain positions? And is this a trend? A lot of times trends are stuff you look at. For instance, when I was younger in jiu-jitsu, I had a knack for leaving my head forward and getting choked out by triangles. It was a trend. I would go to tournaments, get choked out by triangles. In the gym, I'd get choked out by triangles. So my coach made me work from that position for a solid month. I rolled, and every roll was starting from a loose triangle to help figure out that position. I've since developed a really strong triangle defense, and I don't know that I've been finished with a triangle since that particular thing.
Yeah.
Could be wrong, but I don't remember being finished. I haven't been finished with a triangle as a black belt. Yeah, I don't think so. And that started back when I was a like late stage purple belt. And before that, I was getting finished by triangles all the damn time.
Yeah.
And so this stuff doesn't take a long, long time to make real change in your game. You can be very dialed in and focused very intensely for, like a month, 2 months, whatever it is, and you can make massive change in your game. It's just about being very focused about it, and even if you're a newer person in jiu-jitsu, because I know we have a lot of new people, you can still get way better. And again, you just look at it and say, okay, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And then just pick one of those directions to move to. You don't have to, the direction doesn't have to be right. You can always change paths.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to have the right direction forever. This isn't like when you're talking to the 18-year-old who's supposed to know what he's going to do with his life for the rest of it, right? Hey, 18-year-old, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? You ready to sign up for college and go under massive amounts of debt for a decision that you have no idea what you want to do with? Hey, let's do it. This is us being able to decide what we want to do, and we can flip on a dime and we can change it. You can literally go from I'm focused on takedowns and top pressure to, I want to be a guard puller. I know one of my guys, Brandon Reed, right? He competes and does jiu-jitsu and, all about the top game. He plays guard a little bit here and there, but all about the top game. In the gym, though, he plays a ton of guard.
Yeah.
He just, especially like after big camps where he's been focused on a lot of takedowns and everything else, to just keep things fun, he'll do something else. He'll go play off of his guard, play leg locks and sweeps and stuff, just to have some fun with it. And so those are some ideas to consider.
Well, a couple of great points you made. One was, you're using that 80-20 principle, but you're using it. All right, here's my weak spots. I'm going to spend 80% of my time, maybe 80% of my rolls starting in this position where I'm terrible, where I'm like, where most of my problems are. So that little segment was where you were having the most trouble. So you took all that time and you focused all that time on the area where you had the most trouble. And now you don't have any, or you're not getting submitted from triangle. That's a position where you feel very comfortable escaping out of or even avoiding altogether. So that's a great idea. And the other thing you mentioned earlier on that I wanted to touch base on was the perspective of like what your idea of success is during training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. talked about that with John as well. John had mentioned like, hey, like there's certain things I was working on, and even though maybe I didn't quote unquote win the round or the roll, there were certain things I wanted to get into,
Mhm.
and I was able to do that. So that's a great mindset to have, especially when you're a beginner. You might get crushed, okay, but you're like, hey, I was able to at least enter into the arm drag or get into
Mhm.
a position I wanted a couple of times versus not being able to do that at all. So that's like, find your, don't define like success in training, because it's hard. We all struggle with that. Like I struggle with it. Um, you know, just like if I have a tough round or somebody kind of gets the better of me, it's in my head, man. And sometimes it's hard for me to get out of that. But I'm like, hey, I'm trying to be better about what happened there.
Mhm.
Why did that situation occur? Um, did I allow something to occur? Did I give grips up or allow certain grips that I probably should avoid? And so now I'm like, all right, in my head, I'm like, if that ever happens again, I need to be more proactive on certain things. And but again, having a different idea of success. I know I'm
Yeah.
rambling a little, just having a different
No,
idea on
yeah.
what success is during your rolling or training is probably a great way to change your perspective.
Right, and this kinda goes to the idea of actions versus outcomes, right? So, when you base your success solely on the outcome, don't get me wrong, we all want positive outcomes, right? We all wanna, have whatever thing we're looking for, the sort of measure of successes, right?
Yeah.
But any of us that have done something in our life sort of eventually come to the realization that you have to be focused on whatever actions you're taking to make sure that that outcome eventually comes about, because you can't decide when the outcome happens, but you can do things to increase your chances of having it happen. So for instance, let's say as an example, a tournament. You train for a tournament. Let's say that you're doing a tournament and there's a bracket of 60 people, 64 people in there. Okay. Or maybe we'll say 32 or 8 or whatever the number is. Okay. Well, there's a whole group of other people that are there for the same reason you are. Right. So, what makes you so special that you're supposed to win just because you thought you're supposed to?
Yeah.
Right. And so you go into it and you start to learn that through certain actions that you take, you tend to do better. Right. So, as an example, for my own competition experience, I found that, okay, I do a lot better when I focus on specific um, rolling strategies when I'm training, right? So rolling with the points of the tournament in mind,
Yeah.
or rolling with a specific move set in mind. I'm going to try to use my A game. For weeks before the competition. So this is all I'm really using. I found that, I tend to do better when my diet is very dialed in and locked in and I'm not eating a lot of junk. Tend to do better there. I tend to do better and I'm able to train more consistently when I'm strength training and I have less injuries. So that's a good thing. So you find these actions that you take and these actions compound to make the wins possible, right? Like, so, you know, like when I won worlds a couple years ago or Nogi Pans or, whatever, those are just a byproduct of actions, and like when I look at the gym, right? The gym grew from being a very, like, relatively small gym to being a massive gym. And that was done through little actions taken every single day for years, like a decade, right? It wasn't just like a snap of the finger and I was like, oh, this is it, right? It was a lot of work. And so I think that for at least this is how I look at it. You listening, you could disagree with this. But like for instance, if I'm training, a great example, this was this morning. Right now in my gym, the way that we're doing is we're focusing on takedowns. And then in some of our classes, what we're doing is we're focusing on specific positional training for each person. So I'm having each person in the gym just kind of have an idea as to what they want to work on specifically for their game. Some examples are I have some students that are working from their half guard. They want to work on their sweeps and submissions from bottom half guard. That's all they're working. So if they sweep the person, submit them, or the person passes their guard, reset. One of the guys I rolled with this morning, DT, he was working front headlocks. So he's playing the front headlock to either get around to the back or front headlock to go for guillotines, darces, anacondas. Right. And so we're starting every round from the front headlock. Me, I'm starting from the reverse turtle because I'm trying to work on that back take sequence that I missed at the tournament. So I'm like, I'm going to sharpen this up a little bit. And so I'm working there. Now, when we were playing in those positions, I remember as an example with the reverse turtle, um, had some struggles dealing with different body types. And I'm sitting there having to think about like, well, what can I do to make this thing happen? And I'm trying different grips and everything else, and figured out a couple of new ideas that seem to make it better, which is exciting. But on Monday, I think when we were doing this, I didn't have a lot of success with it. I was actually struggling hitting, people. I did a little bit better today, but even after that training session, I was like, oh, I feel good with this. I feel good that I did my position and I was working specifically on this thing, because I know that this is what it takes to get better. These are the actions required to make the outcome happen, which is I want to be able to hit this in competition more often. I've hit it a few times, but I missed it. I want to be able to nail it every time. How does that happen? You take actions, and what are the actions you have to take? You have to be really focused on stuff. You can't just sort of bounce around here, there. You got to be like dialed in for a little bit. It's like a diet. Okay, you want to lose weight and you want to be lean. Okay, great. Well, what does that require? That requires you to be dieting for a prolonged period of time, consistently, day in, day out, and not bouncing around, not dieting today and then eating like a butthole tomorrow. It's like you stay locked in, and that's how you get the results you want. And so I think for me, it's always about trying to become, and I think this is a useful idea for jiu-jitsu in general, is becoming outcome independent. Right? Independent of the outcomes. When you're dependent upon a certain outcome happening, you become very fragile. You get upset because you didn't win. You get upset because you didn't get the submission, the escape, whatever you're looking for. It's like when someone goes on a date and they're expecting this person to want to hang out with them again or go home with them or whatever, right? They come in with an expectation. If the expectation's not met, then they feel bad, versus just going in and saying, I am going to do everything within my power to make whatever outcome I want to have happen. But if it doesn't happen, hey, I don't control that. I'll just take in the data, work on it next time. That'll help you avoid a lot of issues in jiu-jitsu, because a lot of people get frustrated. A lot of people quit jiu-jitsu long before they ever have injuries, because injuries can be a really real issue in jiu-jitsu.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But a lot of people quit long before the injuries, because they just can't handle like the fact that they know what they want to have happen, but they haven't gotten there yet. It's like someone who is learning how to draw. They can look and see what like a good drawing looks like. They understand what that looks like, but they're unable to replicate it. A lot of times we understand what skill and quality look like, but a lot of times in the beginning we're not able to replicate that, and that can be frustrating. It can be frustrating to know what you're wanting to have happen and not have happen for you. But that's part of it. And so you have to be independent of the outcomes, and you just got to put the actions in first. And I think that makes it a lot easier and a lot more fun. So going back to the idea, right? You get focused on what you're doing. You dial in on that stuff, and then boom, you go. And I sound like a lot of times I've broken record on the YouTube channel and this stuff. But when you look at all the data and stuff like that, when they're talking about skill acquisition, so much of it goes to consistent long-term consistency, showing up, right? And then some measure of focus as to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, like just consistency is, I mean, you can't have success without it. That's what equals progress, so equals improvement. It's the non-exciting stuff. It's the eating the same foods that work, right? Like probably like how much food do you eat, right? Like I probably eat out of like a very small amount of foods. And those are what leads to all this success, versus if I eat a bunch of different stuff, I can never track or know what's making me feel good, what's making me feel like crap,
Well,
what's up
you
my stomach.
technically could track your food. You could go like, because there are guys that like they eat all kinds of random stuff, but they track everything.
I don't have
And
the energy for that.
That's it. Me either. Like I don't have the time. I don't think most people do. So it's just easier for me to say, eat this.
Well, I know if I eat this thing and eat this way, it's going to give me these type of results. I'm going to feel this way. It's consistency. It's like, I know if I put this much time in the gym and this amount of effort, I'm going to hopefully yield these results. I mean, I think having a focus on what you can control is always a beneficial thing. You can't, and we all struggle. I struggle with worrying about outcomes,
Everybody
worrying
does.
about things that I can't control. And that's one of the big fears is the fear of the unknown, whether it's going to an open mat or going to a tournament. You don't know this opponent. You don't know what they're going to do. You have to focus on what you do and your game, essentially. Like I can't focus on how you're going to defend me. I got to focus on what I'm going to try to implement and then learn from that. But yeah, being independent of the outcomes, is there, let me ask you this. Is there some, I don't want to say tricks, but like, is there some ideas that have helped you to become not so outcome dependent, so to become independent of these outcomes, so it doesn't quite deter your excitement for progression or improvement?
Man, that's a deep one, because I think a lot of times it comes down to like your own feeling of self-worth,
Mm.
right? Because, think about it this way. When I use this as an example a lot, when I got into riding horses, I was terrible in the beginning because I was new, right? There's that famous, I think it's Goethe. I think he said it was like, in order to become the master, you have to be the fool, So like, this sort of the price you pay, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember getting into riding horses, and I felt so stupid, and everybody's better than me, but I was completely okay with it because this is like, yeah, this is how things work. I know this is going to happen. And I don't feel the need to validate myself by that thing because I know who I am and I know what I've accomplished. And so it's like I'm solid, right? Brandon Reed, when he would compete, he'll repeat to himself, "You're more than this. You're more than this match," right? And people get wrapped up into the match, the role, the whatever, as if it's like the big thing that's going to make or break them. And that's an ego. That's an ego thing, right? Because think about the ego. The ego is nothing more than a movie picture that's playing in your head about who you think you are. It's a series of stories that are stitched together that says, this is who I think I am. Now, the thing about the ego is it's a useful tool as long as you can allow new scenes to be moved into the movie reel, right? So, for instance, like as I got older, the movie reel was, I'm this guy who has this unending cardio, da 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 da. The movie reel then had to have the next part of the story, which said, and then I got old. And then we had to change. A lot of people resist that. Like when we get the unpleasant parts of the story, we don't want to hear it. So we have that friction that builds up, right? And so a lot of people, I think the rub sometimes becomes they have such an attachment to feeling good or whatever that they have trouble being bad at stuff. And so that can be part of it. I'm not saying that's always the case, but it can be part of it, right? Because, why is it so friggin' important for you to be improving at a certain rate? Why are you so special that you're supposed to be better than everybody else, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive to be the best that you can be, but what makes you so special? You've been doing this for 6 months. Who says you're supposed to be this good or that good? It's just your own striving to validate yourself because everybody wants to be good at something and they want to be able to go, look what I got, look what I did, versus just doing the thing and enjoying the thing for what it is. And so I think that one of the things for me is like finding I try to do things that I enjoy doing no matter what. So for instance, if I lifted, done jiu-jitsu, whatever, and nothing, I never got any better, never got any more muscular. I mean, I am, but we'll say I did, I'd still do them because I enjoy the way I feel after doing them and I enjoy the whole environment of them. With my business, I enjoy a lot of the different things that I do within that business. It doesn't mean it's not a lot of work, but I enjoy them. And it allows me to enjoy the things in that moment. And so I would say that too, when you are say into it with the jiu-jitsu side of it, how do you sort of get detached? Well, you focus on what you're doing and enjoy that part of it. Focusing on like, hey, I'm going to go into the gym. Let me work on this technique. Man, I really enjoyed trying to hit that technique today. Or man, I came into the gym, got smashed today, but man, I had a good day today and was hanging out with the guys afterwards. Overall, it was a good day. Finding those little bits and pieces of enjoyment that you can enjoy in the moment, stuff that you actually have control of, and just finding a love for doing the thing rather than like what you're going to get for it, I think is really important. Because when you can do that, there's magic there. There's
Mhm.
magic. And that's where a lot of times the consistency comes from, where you're no longer tethered to, well, how does this go for me? Like, did I do well today? Whatever, or oh man, this is no fun. Like, if you can detach yourself from that, that's the magic. I think that's at least been the case for me, both in jiu-jitsu, business, everything else that I do. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully, you got some ideas from it that you can chew on to support your jiu-jitsu. Hey, guys, real quick. I have I've never made it available. It's always been like a bonus where if you bought one of my courses, if you came to one of my events, you could get one. But I recently had a batch of them printed up. If you would like to get it, I've got a book called Survive. It's a jiu-jitsu book. I've revised it a little bit, and it's basically just fundamental training strategies and jiu-jitsu mindsets to help you improve faster. I say as a white belt, but for really anybody, it's really anybody that gets into jiu-jitsu, I think you can find some value in it. It's available right now, US and internationally. If you want to snag one, all you need to do is go to my website at chujitsutraining.com/survivebook. Or if you're on my email list, I'm sending it out now, but chujitsutraining.com/survivebook. So if you guys, want to read something and kind of go into it, that'll be an option for you. But big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, if you guys want to check them out, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order. So if you find something you like, you want to try CBD products, you want to try some CBN products to see if it helps you sleep, whatever it is, then again, you can save 30% off your order with the promo code Chewjitsu30. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. If you guys want to get some new gear, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, whatever it is, jiu-jitsu related, they got it all. Good prices, good quality, good customer service. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website, and then the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, if you want to support the Patreon, you can do so by going to our Patreon website at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. You guys know how it works. You go on there for a very inexpensive price. You support the podcast. You get a bunch of extras like seminar recordings, stretching routines for jiu-jitsu practitioners, warm-up routines for jiu-jitsu practitioners. We have a bunch of extra content from the guests that we've had over the year. A lot of that and more at the patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And guys, if you're not already on my email list and you'd like to be, then get my daily email that I send out. You can join by going to my website at chujitsu.net/join. When you join up, I'll send you a daily email that goes into everything from training strategies to dieting ideas I think are useful to, whatever, anything that I think might be useful to your training, books I'm reading, so forth and so on. I'll just let you know I do throw promotional stuff in there too. It's almost like if you're watching a show and there's a commercial, right? So typically towards the end, there's a commercial there somewhere for something I've got going on, whether that's a product, that's an event, that's someone else's product that I think could be useful to you. But again, if you're interested, you can check it out at chujitsu.net/join and to become part of the Chew crew. And I'll send you an ebook that goes into some strategies on how to improve and be more focused with your training, as well as a video to go with it. Big thanks to you guys for being here. If you guys want to support the podcast, you can also roll on over to our wherever you listen to the podcast. And if they have a rating function, you can give us a positive rating. I remember there was a old podcast years ago that we did, and someone made a nasty comment that was like, what is it? It's like 45-minute podcast with X amount of minutes of ads, a thing, I'll pass, whatever. And I'm like, you actually didn't listen to the ads, because a lot of times the ads are not necessarily traditional ads. It's either me talking like this, where we just kind of go on rants about stuff at the end. It's like the Easter egg at the end if you listen to all of it. Yeah. And then also too, a lot of times I'm telling you specific stuff that might be useful to you within the ads. So I try to make them at least somewhat useful. And my ad reads are very short when we do it. And that's something with you guys. If you listen to it, I don't do the traditional ad reads because I don't like them. And I only have products or associated with the podcast that I actually like. This is why, there's a lot of different products that are really popular amongst other podcast platforms that I don't use and I don't feel comfortable talking about. There's plenty of them that you see all the podcasters pushing, right? And they're like, oh, this stuff is great, I use it every day. And I'm like, no, you don't. So there's a lot of stuff that we've been offered that I don't really touch on, just because, again, it's money, sure. But if you guys are going to be here for a long time, I want to take care of you. Also, a lot of my students are on here, and I don't want to have to look my students in the face and say, oh man, I sold you out for whatever the affiliate price was or whatever. That makes me feel nasty. I don't like that. So, yeah, there is stuff that obviously we push and everything else and advertise, but it's all stuff that we've gotten some benefit out of. And so we feel comfortable sharing it. But that said, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate you all. And if you like the podcast, shoot us a message. We get Instagram messages periodically. There is a Jiu-Jitsu podcast Instagram. So if you go there and if you want to shoot us a message, a request or anything, or if there's a guest you'd like to see on the podcast, go over there, send it into the Jiu-Jitsu Instagram or on to our email for the Jiu-Jitsu podcast at gmail.com. And you can send us your requests and we'll take a look at it. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. I'm done talking to you guys. We'll see you next week.